Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the next panel of the Freedom Games. The panelists are in a strong group. This is going to be a reviving or shocking discussion. My name is Bartosz Wieliński. I'm a Deputy Editor-in-Chief of Gazeta Wyborcza, and we are going to discuss today whether the world can still learn from solidarity and peace movements, strength through peace. Is it the motto we should hold for contemporary politics in Europe and worldwide? And my panelists, well, that's a perfect match for the topic. Veton Surroi, he came to us from Kosovo. He is a politician, a journalist, founder and former leader of the Reformist Party. Next to me, Ece Temelkuran, a Turkish novelist and a journalist, a well-known persona. And last but not least, Adam Michnik. My first and only boss of mine for 28 years, editor-in-chief of Gazeta Wyborcza. And from the professional dependence, he's my first person to ask the question. Adam, we are talking how solidarity changed the world. Is it going, the old solidarity, of course, is it still going to change the world? And as a true veteran of the original solidarity, when did you understand 40 years ago, over 40 years ago, that what was happening in Poland would impact not just the country, but it would have international influence? Was it when Solidarity published this appeal to the nation of Eastern Europe, autumn '98, or when Polish-Czech Solidarity started to work earlier, later? Let's travel in time together. Good morning. Well, I would like to thank the organizers for having me at this great event today in those beautiful rooms in which the better part of the world is meeting, the better part of Europe. Today, the world is turning, and we don't know how it's gonna end. One thing you know for sure is how did it all start. In my opinion, it didn't start from the message to the nations of the world. It didn't start from the Polish-Czechoslovakian solidarity. It started from the strike in the shipyard in August 1980, because that was a symbolic moment in a state where the Communist Party held the rule. It had the monopoly of the power of information, of everything, and which party said its doctrine was the dictator of proletariat. That was the basis, the legitimization of its power. And all of a sudden, in Gdańsk shipyard, there is a strike led by Lech Wałęsa, with Bogdan Borusewicz being his spiritus movens. And all of a sudden, the proletariat shows a red card to the proletariat's dictator. It tells the party to retire, to give up. And for the very first time in history, independent trade unions were formed, and the force that forced the party to yield was the proletariat. That was the turning point, the legitimization of communism as the project for the future. And afterwards, we had different turns. What matters today? At that time, The basic challenge for all of us was, and basic call for all of us, was freedom. Today, it is the defense of what we achieved then. The defense that has lots of traps, and what threatens us today is a new phenomenon. It's something I name Putinism. It's Putin's project of ruling the state and the Putin's way of organizing public life. And we can see that Putinism in Hungary of course, in Russia itself, but we also see those who dream of Putinist state in Poland, but also in the US. And the future is painted in the time of uncertainty, as the title of this conference sounds. And it's not just a dispute between the right and left wing. That's what I need to highlight that. Nazism wasn't a right-wing concept. It was a totalitarian concept. The right wing at the time were Christian Democrats, National Democrats. That was the right wing at that time. Nazism was never right wing. Bolshevism was not left-wing party. It was Social Democrats that were left-wing. Bolshevik was a totalitarian project. What we see today is a mixture of Nazism, Bolshevism, but still not accomplished as power as such, not yet. So then in 1980, 1981, did you understand that what was happening would impact other states? I can't speak for the others. I did understand it. I was convinced we were moving the rock from its foundation, that this internationality changed, gained a new dimension, that what was happening in Poland would have effects everywhere. And I remember our discussions when we were forming the first government led by Tadeusz Mazowiecki. We argued, I believed, at that time we had to grab the power. Others believed that was too early, that we didn't have the potential yet, but it was clear it had to go on. After that, there was just a countdown. Hungary, East Germany, Czechoslovakia, Bulgaria, Albania. It stopped in Romania. There was bloodshed. In Poland, we were lucky to dismantle the communist dictator through peaceful means. Will it ever repeat again? I doubt. All right. A question goes to Ece Temelkuran. Is it really so that Poland inspired then and inspires today the whole world? Perhaps it's our megalomania. We like to think we are the center of the world. History is going here. The Polish Pope, the President of the European Council, Lech Wałęsa. So Poles are a bit megalomaniac in their blood. Perhaps it is different. Perhaps we exaggerate saying that solidarity formed Europe, that solidarity is the way how you fight dictatorship.
Well, I'm a guest, so I cannot tell that Poles are megalomaniac, obviously. But when you speak about solidarity, I remember this interesting instance in 1980 in Turkey. In 1980, my country was about to experience a military coup. And those who are supporting the military coup were constantly making news about Poland and the Solidarność movement, because they were trying to tell their audiences that this is what communism looks like. You see, even the workers, the proletariat, hates communism. So that's why we are trying to remove communism. That's why we have a military coup and so on. I wrote a novel about that period. That's why I went through the news in much detail. That's why I know how Poland became an example about how communism was horrible. The thing that solidarity or Solidarność movement at the time, I think Adam made a very important point by saying that it wasn't the declaration, it was the strike at Gdansk, the strike and the workers' movement that started everything, and that was the inspiring part of this whole story. They were trying to bring not only freedom, but human dignity to the center of attention. And human dignity today is in pieces. Then the workers wanted to be free from the totalitarian regime, but they thought that freedom and dignity will be coupled, will be together. I think decades later, we see that freedom is not always coupled with human dignity. Neoliberal policies that have been imposed on entire globe destroyed human dignity on several levels. And today I think the message of solidarity, both Solidarność in Poland and solidarity in a global sense, should be about human dignity. And that human dignity can only be realized through social justice. It is true that totalitarian regimes, imprisoned people, they tortured people, they wiped out the individual from the political context. But also neoliberal ideals, Thatcherism, Reaganism since 1980s have been changing the world in such a way that we have these authoritarian leaders and a new form of fascism. I don't agree with Adam when he says that this is Putinism, because I think Putin was not invented by Putin. I think he was invented by Ronald Reagan and Thatcher, because they were the ones who humiliated the entire Russian nation by harsh privatization politics, by leaving a country without anything. So these people, some of them by choice, some of them by pressure, had to choose a strong man to defend them in this rigged game. So, like Putin, Tayyip Erdogan in Turkey, Modi in India, Trump in the United States, and several other similar leaders in the world came to power promising people that they are going to defend the pride of the oppressed people, of their supporters. The problem is, it wasn't their pride that was bruised, it was their dignity. But there wasn't any union, or there wasn't any powerful political movement to tell people that it is not your pride, but actually it is your dignity that is broken. I think today, both Solidarność in Poland and solidarity in global sense should be thinking about these concepts And perhaps we should all ask ourselves, how can we create a solidarity on global level for human dignity and social justice? I think this is the revolutionary question of today.
Dziękuję bardzo. A teraz
Thank you very much. Now question to Veton Surroi. Well, Balkans are close to Poland. Those are areas related with us in a cultural way. Also common oppression, common history. How solidarity resonated on Balkans, the ideas of solidarity. It is clear it was not a change through peace. There was a number of wars, genocide. Why this idea of solidarity were accepted in a different way? Maybe they were even contradicted in a way.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and especially with Adam and Ece. And it is a good reason to be here and to talk about how Solidarność and Poland influenced Kosovo. There's an image that Kosovo was an armed struggle, but actually Kosovo was inspired to a great extent by Solidarność and by Poland in peaceful resistance, and I was involved personally in the beginning from 1989, 1990. And there are three things that we took as guidance points. The first one is that Solidarność broke the consensus of the dictature of the proletariat. So the image that the people are satisfied with the state in which they are, and a vociferous no to the way that this is done, and a vociferous no in a non-violent manner, showed us that we have to show that we are dissatisfied with the way. We had a double reason for it. We were occupied in 1989, 1990 by Serbia. And so therefore our challenge was how to do this in a non-violent fashion, and how to do it inspired by KOR at the time, the Committee to Defend the Workers. So institutions of civil society that create a parallel society to the society of repression. Mm-hmm. The second point was that we lived in an age in which the word was important and the free word was important. And so the samizdat and the idea that you need to propagate your own version of truth or dispel the irregularities or non-truths that the regime does became fundamental for a society that wants to build itself on values. And therefore, Solidarność was a victory of values. Victory of values that was done not only through the protests of workers, but through people like Adam and the others who actually dispelled, who disavowed the regime from its truths. And the third element that is important is that it is part of a historical change. And we saw in Poland the beginning of the fall of communism. We saw at the time, maybe not in so early, but we saw that this was a process that would eventually reshape Europe as such. And we wanted to be part of that free Europe. And therefore, our first requests were basically free expression, free votes, right to association, all the basics that they had been sought in the Polish movement. Of course, there's a limit to which nonviolence can do its job. And unfortunately, in Yugoslavia, things degenerated into a war that has never ended, actually, because wars don't end until people reach peace in a very open way. But so, yes, Solidarność was of great inspiration to us. Poland was a great inspiration to us.
Okay, thank you. Adam, pytanie następne.
Adam, next question about a balance of what happened August 1980 It's 45 years have passed, 35 years after August events, 36 years. I look at the balance of these changes and I look at exit polls and support of parties in Poland. Right wing have 40% altogether. So together with Lower and Order party, they have a half of the society. So those are people who not fully believe in freedom, basically. So after all that, with this internal situation, can we still be an example for the world as a country that builds democracy? Well, in my opinion, we cannot be any example for the world at this moment in Europe. Two countries showed that this wave, brown wave, populism way, nihilist way, can be stopped. Those are Romania and Moldova. But if you say about the balance, well, it's not so clear. Here I have to answer our great guest from Istanbul. Well, no one will explain me that Reagan is responsible for Putin or Margaret Thatcher. In my opinion, it is a narrative that in some way makes them responsible for wrong choices of our societies. Because indeed, if Reagan and Thatcher are guilty, and new liberalism is guilty in everything, then where is the guilt of those who voted for Trump? Are they then innocent? I mean, it's unacceptable for me. I learned in Poland one thing through the years of the dictatorship, not to blame external factors. In Europe, there is this trend. In Bulgaria, Turks were to blame for everything. In Slovakia, Hungarians to blame for everything. Or Romanians, and so on. I mean, it's not like that. That 8 years of Law and Order party in Poland, or even more years of Putin's rule in Russia, is a guilt of Reagan. In Poland, this approach passed exam. In Russia, it didn't, because big stakeholders blocked it. But on the place of a very unjust system of the transformation, we received para-fascistic system, and this difference should not be blurred. It's something else is Germany ruled by Weimar Republic, and something else is NSDAP. There is a difference, and we see and feel this difference in Poland very clearly. Democracy does not give happiness to people, but it allows to reduce the level of misfortune. And Poland is not any example. The result of solidarity was the result of few factors. And Reagan or Thatcher's, well, they were allies for Polish freedom at that moment. I never was an enthusiast of conservative ideas. Nevertheless, I need to admit that they defend freedom in Poland. There were the Stalin forces in our countries and in Russia, not Reagan, not Thatcher. And now, if we repeat the narrative, extremely left from university campuses in United States, it is mixing truth with the lie. We don't like policy of Reagan policy, but we should not blame Reagan for Putin's crimes. Putin is a para-fascistic regime, and the tendencies of our countries in Europe have also para-fascistic dimension. Not Thatcher caused Brexit of Great Britain. Well, Poland is not an example, but American or British right-wing can be an opponent but not an enemy of democracy. And that is also important for me. With Reagan or with Thatcher, you could fight with methods of parliamentary democracy. But with Putin, you can't fight like that, because for any argument, he brings out AK-47 and shoots. He understands only strength, so you need to be prepared, like Ukraine was, to answer force with force to Putin's force. Thank you. And Ece Temelkuran, I wanted to ask what happens to Turkey. We talk a lot about democracy in Turkey. We look in Hungary, but we don't look so often at what happens on the other side of Bosphorus. What are your perspectives, and what is your situation? Is it going only to be worse? Because from what we see, it looks like this scenario.
I'm going to answer Adam first. Absolutely right. I'm never putting the blame on them. What happened in 1980s. It wasn't only those conditions that created Putin or leaders like him. That's why I call them neo-fascism, all these leaders together, all these movements together in the world, from India to America. And it's not simply putting the blame on the outside, but I want to understand. I know it's wrong. I know those people who have voted or who have supported these leaders have done wrong. But my job is to understand why this wrong was committed. So this is how I see the process. Through neoliberalism, through the imposing of a certain and very limited understanding of democracy to these countries, we all have become almost limited in our thinking, because it was then, in 1980s, the world was met with TINA, there is no alternative, which referred to there is no alternative to neoliberalism, there is no alternative to cutthroat capitalism. That is what that ruined social justice as a central focus point in democracy, and that is the process that produced all these leaders. So obviously, and I left my country because of all these wrongdoing people, supporters of Erdogan, so I know what it is to live in an oppressive country, in a totalitarian country, in a country that is being victim to fascism. But I also have the mission or duty to understand why all this happened and how we can reverse it back to an ideal democracy that has social justice and dignity together with freedom in its center. So thank you for allowing me to make this explanation. And as for Turkey, I think there is a close connection to the topic here between the things that are happening in Turkey. For those of you who do not know, Erdogan imprisoned Istanbul mayor, who is the most powerful political rival to him. He's been in prison now, like all the other political rivals of his. And this caused a lot of protests, street politics. Thousands, millions of people joined these protests all around the country. The thing is, there have been many protests against oppressive regimes in the last 20 years all around the world, starting from Egypt, Tahrir, Tunisia, several other countries, and it's still going on in Serbia, in several other countries. What is different, what's happening in Turkey is a little bit different, and I think it presents us with a great example of what we can do today against these fascist movements or fascist leaders who have the power in their hands. This is the first time that a conventional political party, main opposition party, CHP in Turkey, is accommodating the street protests. Through the last 10 years, we've seen street protests that started with big fanfare and then exhausted or suppressed. They mostly did not connect themselves to the political parties. They rejected to connect themselves to the conventional political parties. But for the first time in Turkey now, a political party is becoming a home to the street protests. So the youth is going into the political party while the political party is enlarging itself to, welcome the outrage that is accumulating on the streets. And I think this is a bit like shipwrecks, these metal structures under the sea. They're not alive. And I think political parties today mostly are like shipwrecks. They are non-living. They don't have life in them. But if they accommodate street protests, if they accommodate youth politics, as it happens in Turkey right now, they can become a living reef. So this is what's happening in Turkey. And if it's successful, I think it might be our way out from authoritarian regimes in the world on a global level. We don't know what's going to happen yet. It is 50-50, but we're hoping that it will happen in Turkey through peaceful means, through elections, which is a very, small chance, but still. And if it happens, I think Americans, British, any country who is dealing with far-right fascist movements would be learning from Turkey.
I tego bardzo Turcji życzę.
That's what we wish you from the deep of our hearts. The processes you are talking about also took place in Poland not long ago, but the outcomes are mixed. And a question to Mr. Surroi, the condition of democracy in the Balkans. A small portion of that region is in the EU. Most is in the waiting room to the EU. We are attacked with information that in some countries in the Balkans, the tensions are so enormous that bloodshed is imminent, especially in Kosovo. Situation is unstable. How? It's such a situation of instability outside the EU can you form and foster democratic society?
Well, there are several answers to this question, but the first one is Kosovo has evolved democratically in quite a good manner. And it is developing its institutions in conditions in which the Western Balkans are actually an unfinished conflict. Conflicts need to finish when societies agree to contractually sign peace and get to a peace project. We are not yet at a peace project. Don't forget, European Union was a peace project. And the conditions for the Western Balkans to become a peace project is to have a shared security space. now as we are speaking, the Western Balkans have all the global clashes on its fault lines. And therefore, the fault line between Kosovo and Serbia is the fault line between a Euro-Atlantic world, which we aspire as Kosovo, and Serbia, which is a Eurasian world, basically. And this is a condition that should not be there. We should aspire to a shared space in which we see security as our continental shared space, Europe as a shared security space. The second, then, is a shared space of integration into the European Union. The fault line between Kosovo and Serbia is the fault line between Kosovo, which has more than 80% of people voting to integrate into the European Union, and Serbia, which has fallen somewhere around 20%. And so this is a very drastic clash in values. Serbia today, the Serbian public opinion today, sees Putin and China more favorably than any other value system in the surrounding. The third element is that, and this is valuable not only for the Balkans, but for Poland, for Europe as a whole, we live in a totally new public sphere. This is not Adam and I and Erce, we were and probably are still, people who have participated in a bourgeois revolution. We have changed dictatorships into democracies in the way other European people did. But in the 21st century, we live in a totally changed public sphere in which deliberative democracy is not the driving force. You do not sit, not many people sit and read Gazeta Wyborcza, but many, many people listen to the TikTok 30-second announcement and develop their thinking and their voting based on that. And part of this great geopolitical, and that's why I mentioned in your first question, identify the historical shift. We have not yet identified the historical shift that is changing our world. And part of it is in the way we have, and this is demonstrated in the way we react. We say, let us resist, let us defend democracy. And that means that the democracy is in an erosive path. The question is not how do we defend the democracy of the 1991 and 2000, but how do we project a democratic world and our societies in that world in the next 25 years. So how is from this quarter of the century to the mid-century that we can develop a new understanding and ideas about democracy?
Mówił pan o
You've mentioned a front line between Kosovo and Serbia. Pardon my ignorance, but the basis for Poland's return to Western Europe, to the Western community of nations, the foundation of integration was reunion between Poles and Germans. Something that we've forgotten. We don't have authorities like Genscher, Bartoszewski, Mazowiecki, Kohl. They are no longer with us, and nobody cares for Polish-German reunion. Reconciliation. Is something like that possible in the Balkans after the war, after the genocide, what happened between Serbia, Kosovo, in Bosnia, in a part of Croatia? This is a question also regarding the moral future of the community we all belong to. Is it the moment even to talk about it? Perhaps it is still too early or too late.
No, it's never early. The question is, there's a fundamental change between how Western Europe was built and what's happened in the Balkans. Western Europe was built basically on an end of a war. The war ended, there was a defeated party, and there were winners. And the winners, fortunately, decided that it was not going to be a punitive attitude towards the losers, but there's going to be a shared space. And NATO came from the idea of not defending the space from the others, but actually not allowing one another to kill each other. And so the idea of reconciliation, of Franco-German reconciliation, the idea of Polish-German reconciliation came on basics, fundamentals that a war has ended. In the Western Balkans, there is still an unfinished war. These are conflicts, these are wars that, with the invasion of Clausewitz, these are wars that are being fought in a political way. And so, in order to get a reconciliation, people need to say, stop, this is it. Wars have ended, and we have to build a prospective future. We are not at that stage yet. You know, you mentioned all these people, and I remember at the time when we were watching Poland attentively, we wished not only that there was an Adam Michnik and that there were Tadeusz Mazowiecki, we also wished that there was a Jaruzelski, that there was somebody who would agree to a round table, that there was somebody who would move this process further. Western Balkans or Serbia did not have a Jaruzelski. It had a Milosevic, and it had then a continuation of these leaders. And the third problem on reconciliation is that at some point you need shared values and attitudes. In the Western Balkans, and this is a problem that is greater than the Western Balkans, we live, and this is my belief, autocracies are not imposed. Autocracies are consensual. People at one point agree, there's a bigger number of people who agree to live in an autocracy than people who do not want to live in an autocracy. And these are changed when the number of people who don't want to live in an autocracy rise up and say, enough. We live in an age of consensual autocracy built on one paradigm, and the paradigm is not even Russia, it's China. China has moved in the last 25 years from a 4% or 5% participation in middle class to around 50%. China and the US are almost at the same stage of middle class participation in society. China has done this by disrespecting the basic rule that we had in the 20th century, that you need democracy in order to have economic development. And since this is now a new rule, the Chinese rule of consensual autocracy, many consensual autocrats in our region want to emulate that. They say, if this can be functioning in China, why can it not be functioning? And so, to get to the end of it, we need a point in which we agree that the region is shared, that it needs peace, that peace is not a passive component, it's an active evolution of relationships, and that all this needs to be within our continent, and this is actually the moment to do it.
Bardzo dziękuję. No,
Thank you very much. We are coming to the end of our session, so this is going to be the final round of our questions. Pre-war time. This is a term frequently used by Prime Minister Tusk. Initially, we thought he exaggerated. That was a figure of speech. Then the 9th of September came, and the Russian drones that flew into Poland, luckily, they were put down by international forces. They were just decoys, but we sensed the taste of true armed conflict that threatens us. The question about the future is, do we need peace movements at all? the revolution of peace and dignity like Gandhi's, Wałęsa's, or perhaps Europe and European states rather need a new Churchill, the man ready to go for war, the man who will prepare us for war. Adam, over to you. Well, we do need a Churchill. I was a supporter of peace movements. The peace movement gave birth to the Green Party in Germany, and they very much supported our underground solidarity. In that term, these were very progressive movements. However, there was one thing that bothered me, that they had anti-American, not anti-Soviet inspirations. Today, in Poland, those who speak about peace do not address it to Putin. They do not say Putin should stop murdering Ukrainians. They say they speak about peace in such a way that we should understand this as normal, the situation when Putin is bombarding Ukraine, murdering men, women and children, and there is no space for any contempt whatsoever. While the Putin's regime is like a bicycle. When it stops, it will collapse. So we need to help it collapse. Russia always benefited from lost wars. The Crimean War led to post-Sevastopol relaxation. The lost war against Japan gave birth to the protest of 1905 and the first Russian constitution. The First World War led to the constitutional changes and the removal of the Tsar system and a couple of months of political freedom. And so, in a nutshell, post-peace movements today are either built on ignorance or hypocrisy, because what we need is not a pacifist movement that claimed we mustn't shoot at Hitler. We need anti-Hitler movement to stop Hitler. And this meaning, I don't think that the Gandhi's philosophy that actually won in Poland, that it would make any sense towards Putin. In Polish, there is a song saying, "It takes two to dance the tango." The problem with Putin is that we, as Democrats, think we play chess with him, and he plays some harsh games with us. We are manipulated, lied, we go for appeasement. We don't want to end the war. We would be happy if not intensify the war, while he is intensifying the war, not those who defend from him.
Thank you. So do we need a pacifistic movement in this world that aims to the war? If you made 3 minutes, so we fit in the time?
They invited me here because I wrote this book called How to Lose a Country, 7 Steps from Democracy to Fascism. And in this book, I said these leaders are like pigeons, like Putin, Erdogan, Modi, Trump. And you cannot play chess with a pigeon. They scatter the pieces, they shit on the board, and they flutter away proudly. So you're right. A pacifistic movement is not the only choice or cannot be the only solution to this problem. This is so interesting. I'm living in Berlin, and there is always this, support for Ukraine, very vocal. But whenever I come to Poland, I feel the war. In Berlin, you don't feel the war. In Poland, you do. In Warsaw, in Gdansk, in Lodz now, and yesterday I was in Krakow. So I met some Ukrainians in Krakow, and I felt their pain. And I had this conversation with them, and I told them, you're unlucky in terms of support from progressives around the world, because Ukraine war happened between Syria and Gaza. And Ukrainians, as you say, by the progressives of the world, by the peace movement, were seen as luxury victims. They were invited to Europe, they were sent, weapons, they were welcomed everywhere, whereas Syrians, and you know what happened in Gaza. So they were, unfortunately, were the victims of a wrong comparison between victims, the Ukrainians. This is so heartbreaking, and it's wrong. And I don't know how we're going to do that. But I know that there is less and less support for call for peace anyway. Nobody talks about peace in that way, in Gandhi way. And the crisis is crystallizing. Yeah, I think we're all going to be talking about weapons now, which is a pity, because when we talk about weapons, the words fall silent. But yeah, this is the reality.
Okay. Veton Surroi. Co z pokojem na świecie?
Veton Surroi, what's about a peace in the world?
Every hour since October 2023, a child was killed in Gaza. Every single hour. And so what happened in these 2 years was that the world accepted genocide as such, after saying so many years that this was not acceptable. Standing up in a nonviolent way in Gaza or in Ukraine or in any other way is impossible. But standing up against the values that support the war of Putin against Ukraine, standing up against the values that kill a child every single hour in Gaza, is something that is valuable and that can be brought in from the last century. Because we are living in an age of extreme polarization. A child is killed every hour in Gaza, but the voter in the most sophisticated, developed parts of Europe are voting to the extreme right. And so in this age of polarization, it is extremely important for the values of democracy, the values of human rights, the values of solidarity, the values of basic human empathy to emerge. And I think this is what is going to happen in the next 25 years, is the clash, again, between a reinvented notion of democracy and those that will imperil the rights and the democracy of this world.
Dobrze, proszę Państwa.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we reached the end of our discussion. Thank you very much for participating in this panel.
Brawa są dla wszystkich. Nie?
This applaud is for everyone, not only for Adam Michnik. Ladies and gentlemen, strength through peace can well still learn from solidarity movements. Ece Temelkuran, Veton Surroi from Kosovo and Adam Michnik from Poland. Thank you.
So we just had an emergency landing in Poland, in Łódź. Yeah, don't worry guys, we won't be here for long. Lads. Hello vlog, so I know we were supposed to show you some wild animals and a bit more sun, but
Yeah, instead we have to spend 2 days in this boring place.
come on.
Did you say boring? I will show you beautiful nature and animals and even more. And you will see what this region has to offer. Deal?
So we said yes, because why not, right? And this girl took us around the whole region. We ate pierogies. We saw some Polish art. We saw some wild animals. We got spiritual. And after all, we fell in love with this place.
W kinie doceniam prawdziwe emocje,
Na boisku pilnuję czystej gry.
W kuchni poszukuję autentycznych smaków.
ale w internecie jest to trudniejsze.
W internecie wobec informacji też trzeba być sędzią. Dezinformacja jest jak bramka strzelona ze spalonego.
Więc jeśli coś we mnie wzbudza emocje, daję sobie czas. Może ktoś specjalnie chce mnie zagotować, bym uległa manipulacji.
Filtruj informacje.
Sprawdzaj ich źródła.
Nie masz pewności? Nie udostępniaj.
Postaw na czysty przekaz.
It can look like this, or like this. It is threatened, but it is our responsibility to protect it. For each person, it means something different. But when we reach it, we all know what it looks like, what it sounds like, or how it feels. And if we all fight for it, it will eventually bring us together. Freedom.
Do PKO Banku Polskiego przenosi się nowy klient.
Weź się, przenieść się jest easy. Czaruś, wytłumacz. Otwierasz konto w PKO Banku Polskim i masz święty spokój. Przeniosą kasę i zlecenia stałe, a pracodawcy poinformują. Ogarniesz to przez internet. Bo to dobry bank jest.
Ej, widzę cię. Wolisz w oddziale? Dawaj do nas.
Otwórz konto w PKO Banku Polskim i dołącz do 12 milionów klientów. PKO, twój bank polski.
Do zgłoszeń? Gotowi? Start!
Ja zgłoszę bibliotekę!
Ja, pierwszy basen w gminie.
Ja amfiteatr gra od naszej orkiestry. Wszystko w waszych rękach. Co powstanie dzięki wsparciu totalizatora sportowego w twojej okolicy? Zgłoś obiekt sportowy lub kulturalny. Wejdź na stronę gdygrasz.pl, bo gdy grasz, wszystko gra.
Well, Atlas Network is, as the name suggests, a network, and it's global. We work all around the world. We're based in the U.S. It's a network, that is to say, organizations that share common values of limited government, of free enterprise, personal liberty, of personal responsibility.
Atlas Network provides training and support to help build capacity, but most importantly, we give our partners the tools they need to be successful.
Telewizja Polska to więcej tego, co widzowie cenią najbardziej. Pasjonujące filmy i seriale, a w obsadzie najbardziej gorące nazwiska. Największe sportowe imprezy i momenty, które przejdą do historii. Bieżące wydarzenia, którymi żyje Polska i świat. Przebojowe koncerty, które łączą w zabawie wszystkich Polaków. Znakomite spektakle, które gromadzą rekordową publiczność. Telewizja Polska. Otwórz się na więcej.
Mam plan na bezpieczną firmę. To plan firmowy z cybertarczą, która blokuje zagrożenia w sieci.
Cyberbezpieczeństwo? Masz od tego Orange. Teraz cybertarcza za 0 zł we wszystkich planach firmowych, a w wybranych smartfony 50% taniej. Orange tu jest.
Kiedy zapala się lampka on air, to jest najlepszy moment.
Nie ma jednego instrumentu, który lubię najbardziej. To zawsze jest kontekst.
Uwielbiam sport bez obrazu właśnie z tej perspektywy, kiedy to ja mogę ten obraz kreować.
Pusty stadion nie jest cichy. Tam gołębie startują.
Jak ja bym chciała, żeby z mojego radia było słychać "Będzie okej".
Ono może być cichutko w tle. Radio, które jest przyjacielem tego odbiorcy, przyjacielem człowieka.
Polska stolica kultury. Jesteś na miejscu.
Myślisz, że to ktoś wyjątkowy. Miłośnik kultury. Kto sypie cytatami z pamięci. A to może być ktoś, kto na wakacje pakuje książkę. Tę samą co rok temu. To możesz być ty. Bo czytanie nie jest dla wybranych. Jest dla wszystkich. Podziel się tym.
PL Music Video Awards, festiwal polskich wideoklipów, spotkania, projekcje, warsztaty, do tego gala finałowa i wybór najlepszych polskich teledysków. Zapraszamy do Łodzi 4-6 grudnia, szczegóły na www.plmva.com.